The Bloody Benders, a family of German immigrants, settled in Labette County, Kansas in the early 1870s, became infamous for what was uncovered after years of strange disappearances. Living along the Osage Trail, a route used by travelers heading west, the Benders opened a small inn, presenting themselves as a friendly rest stop for weary travelers. However, the Bender property held dark secrets, as evidenced by the bodies found in shallow graves surrounding their homestead. Number 1. The mysterious disappearances. During the early 1870s, southeastern Kansas, particularly around Cherryvale and Labette County, became infamous for a string of mysterious disappearances that confounded locals. This remote and sparsely populated area was frequented by settlers, drifters, and pioneers, many of whom were making the long and treacherous journey westward. The Osage Trail, a common route in the region, was known for its desolate landscape and rough terrain, which made travelers vulnerable to natural dangers as well as human threats. Yet the eerie trend emerging from this area went beyond the usual challenges of frontier life. People were vanishing without a trace, leaving behind friends, family, and communities that had little idea where to begin searching. As word of these disappearances spread, locals and neighboring towns began to speculate on the cause. The frontier already carried a degree of risk, and while bandit attacks, conflicts with native tribes, and fatal encounters with wildlife were real dangers, there was something uniquely chilling about the sudden increase in missing persons cases around Labette County. Unlike more common disappearances where evidence was sometimes left behind, these travelers simply vanished, often with no trace of their possessions, horses, or wagons. Rumors quickly circulated, drawing suspicion to possible foul play. Travelers who had heard stories of ghostly cries in the prairie night and odd sightings of shadowy figures on the trail began to avoid the area, further isolating the region and allowing the grim mystery to grow. The disappearances intensified when prominent local figures, such as Dr. William York, failed to return from routine travels. Dr. York was a well-known man in the region, a respected physician whose connections reached into neighboring towns. His vanishing in March 1873 heightened alarm and brought scrutiny to the region, as his family, including his brother Colonel York, launched an extensive search that galvanized locals into action. Investigators and volunteers scoured known trails, towns, and nearby creeks, but the search yielded no trace of Dr. York. This case, however, made it clear that the recent disappearances were not isolated or coincidental. They appeared to follow a disturbing pattern that pointed toward calculated actions rather than accidental mishaps. Adding to the growing fear were reports of nearby farmers discovering mutilated bodies, sometimes buried in shallow graves, showing signs of blunt trauma and violent wounds. The discovery of a newborn infant's remains, wrapped in cloth with fatal injuries, sent shockwaves through the community. These discoveries connected the dots, as the locations where these remains were found were consistently near the Osage Trail and often within proximity to a single, unsuspected inn. This inn, operated by the Bender family, soon became the focal point of suspicions, as people began to recall seeing many of the missing individuals around this small establishment before they disappeared. This dark series of events created an atmosphere of dread and mystery in southeastern Kansas, raising questions and suspicions about who could be behind these brutal acts and whether the truth could ever be uncovered. The chilling pattern of disappearances, unexplained screams in the night, and ominous sightings along the prairie continued to feed fear, leaving a haunting shadow over the region that hinted at something far more sinister lurking along the dusty trails of the frontier. Number 2. Discovery at the Bender homestead. The Bender homestead was deceptively simple, but cleverly set up to create a controlled environment where the family could carry out their deadly plans undetected. The small cabin, sectioned by a large canvas curtain, allowed the Benders to hide their movements and maintain strict control over their layout. The front area, which served as a guest space for meals and rest, was designed to seem welcoming yet limited in view, creating a sense of privacy that actually concealed much more sinister intentions. Investigators reported that the cellar, hidden beneath floorboards, was saturated with dried blood, suggesting repeated incidents over time. This cellar was likely used to temporarily store remains before they were discreetly buried outside. When the search expanded to the garden, officials discovered multiple shallow graves. The arrangement of the graves indicated that the Benders did not scatter the bodies randomly, but instead buried them in a specific area that was out of immediate view, further masking the scale of their actions from visitors or passers-by. The forensic evidence of the injuries to the victims, blows to the back of the head, coupled with cuts to the throat, painted a picture of a highly organized, practiced approach. Experts at the time speculated that each victim was seated at the table with their back to the curtain, and once positioned, either Pa or John Bender would deliver a sudden strike to the back of the head. This coordinated method suggested that the family may have even practiced or refined their process over time to ensure it was as swift and silent as possible. The fact that this technique was replicated across multiple victims signaled a family that was methodical in their actions, ensuring there was little to no chance for their guests to react or escape. Outside in the Benders' garden, authorities noticed signs that the graves were intentionally shallow, allowing the family to dig quickly and dispose of bodies with minimal effort. The spacing between the graves suggested that the Benders possibly anticipated the need for multiple burials over time, a chilling indication of their long-term intentions. Personal items discovered near the bodies, including items likely stolen from victims, pointed to an additional motive of profit, revealing the family's potential financial gain from each murder. The setup at the Bender homestead displayed an unsettling mix of control and cold detachment. By controlling every aspect of the environment, from the dinner seating arrangement to the proximity of the graves, the Benders demonstrated a calculated cruelty that left authorities and locals shocked. The homestead became a deeply disturbing crime scene that ultimately shed light on the family's calculated brutality and established them as one of the most notorious criminal groups of the American frontier. Number 3, the Bender family, suspected serial killers. The Bender family was an enigmatic and unsettling presence in southeastern Kansas, unlike most pioneer families. John Sr., known as Pa, was a towering figure with a grim, almost menacing demeanor, and he rarely spoke anything but low, guttural German, giving him a reputation as an intimidating figure. His physical appearance, a burly, unkempt man with a stooped walk, added to his eerie presence. Ma Bender, his partner, was equally intimidating in personality. Described as a fierce and temperamental woman, she was quick to anger and known for her sharp, fast-talking nature. Locals found her unfriendly, and her reputation for a short fuse only fueled suspicions about her. John Jr., Pa and Ma's son, displayed behavior that led people to consider him feeble-minded. He would often burst into fits of seemingly inexplicable laughter, which was unsettling to visitors. Despite his unpredictable nature, he was more sociable than his parents, frequently interacting with visitors. Kate, the youngest, presented a stark contrast to her family's hostile reputation. She was young, lively, and outspoken, attracting significant attention in the community. Claiming to be a spiritualist, she organized seances and offered spiritual healing services to locals, a practice that, while controversial, made her a curiosity in the region. Kate's spiritualist beliefs, however, were unusual even by frontier standards. She argued that murder could be justified as a means of dealing with evil, a shocking statement that would have been viewed with suspicion, even in such a lawless setting. Her advocacy for free love and unconventional ideas only added to the mystery surrounding the family, with some locals drawn to her charisma, while others were deeply disturbed by her moral beliefs. The family's actual relationships remained unclear, and rumors spread that John Jr. and Kate might not have been siblings but lovers, which was further supported by their occasional displays of closeness. Some questioned whether Ma and Pa were truly married or simply posed as a couple for reasons of convenience or deception. These uncertainties fueled speculations about whether the Benders' entire family structure was an elaborate facade meant to cover up their true intentions and origins. Additionally, conflicting reports emerged about the family's background, with some suggesting they had ties to criminal groups in Europe or previous involvement in criminal activities in the United States. While many frontier families struggled to survive and integrated into communities, the Benders kept to themselves, avoiding local gatherings and never engaging in typical community events. Their isolation made it difficult for neighbors to know the family's true nature, allowing the Benders to conceal their sinister activities for as long as they did. This reclusive lifestyle, coupled with their unique dynamics, made them deeply unsettling to the few who interacted with them, furthering their mystique and ultimately sealing their reputation as one of America's earliest and most notorious criminal families. Number 4. The Benders' escape and theories about their fate. After authorities discovered the grim evidence on the Bender property, an intense manhunt was launched. However, by the time investigators arrived, the Benders were already gone, leaving behind minimal traces. They abandoned their wagon in a nearby town, a clue that briefly reignited hope among the search teams. But with few additional leads, the pursuit slowed. Early efforts to locate the family centered around nearby states, as sightings were reported in Texas, Colorado, and even as far north as Michigan. Eyewitnesses claimed to have spotted individuals resembling the Benders, leading local lawmen on wild chases that ultimately produced no solid evidence. Rumors that the Benders had fled to Europe gained traction, with some suggesting they could have returned to a German-speaking region. This theory pointed to the family's likely European origins, and several members of the community believed they had connections to immigrant networks in the U.S. that might have helped them escape. Despite efforts by local and national authorities to investigate these theories, no verifiable evidence of the family's presence in Europe was ever uncovered. The lack of leads allowed various theories to emerge. One prominent belief was that the Benders were tracked down and killed by vigilantes. This idea was fueled by tales of vigilante justice common in frontier life, where formal law enforcement was scarce, and communities often took matters into their own hands. According to some accounts, locals believed that vigilante groups located the Benders, executed them, and buried the bodies in unmarked graves to prevent the family from escaping justice. However, no physical proof or documented confession has ever confirmed this theory. Decades after the Benders' disappearance, Laura Ingalls Wilder, famed author of Little House on the Prairie, claimed that her father participated in the search for the Benders and suggested that justice had been served. Wilder's statements contributed to the myth of the Benders' end by implying that they faced vigilante justice. However, as her family had left the area shortly before the Bender case broke, historians remain skeptical of her account, viewing it as a likely embellishment. Another theory suggested that the Bender family split up to avoid detection, living under aliases across the U.S. Some claimed that John Jr. and Kate Bender eventually settled in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, using assumed identities. Reports emerged of a woman resembling Kate, who allegedly practiced fortune-telling in the region, raising suspicions that she might have been the elusive spiritualist daughter. Still, these stories lack conclusive evidence, and Colorado law enforcement was unable to confirm any ties between the Bender family and the residents in question. Some Kansas residents speculated that the Benders assumed entirely new identities and blended into other immigrant communities. Others claimed they moved to uncharted territories in the West, where they could continue their lives without scrutiny. This theory aligns with the practice of outlaws in the 1800s, who often escaped justice by altering their appearance and relocating far from their original homes. However, the specific Bender family members' whereabouts remained unknown, leading many to conclude that they either died in anonymity or successfully lived out their lives hidden. In later years, brief notes about possible Bender sightings continued to surface, but none yielded the conclusive proof needed to close the case. The lack of evidence only intensified the legend surrounding the Benders, making their disappearance one of the most enduring mysteries of the American frontier. Number 5. Legacy of the Bloody Benders. The Bloody Benders' legacy endures as a chilling symbol of the darkness that could lurk within the American frontier, a place often seen as both the land of opportunity and a realm of unchecked lawlessness. Their brutal actions left a profound impact on the local community, shifting the perception of the Old West from merely a tough and untamed land to a territory where even the most horrifying secrets could remain hidden for years. The Benders are often referenced as America's first documented family of serial killers, a status that set a precedent for the macabre fascination with cases of familial crime. The unsettling nature of the Bender case transformed their story into part of American folklore. Their homestead became infamous, with curious visitors traveling to see the grounds long after the Benders had vanished. The site itself was said to carry a sense of dread, and stories circulated that the land was cursed. Decades later, newspapers, dime novels, and storytellers further fueled the Bender legend, embellishing details to present the family as almost mythical figures embodying evil in human form. This portrayal of the Benders helped to establish the archetype of the killer family, a theme that has influenced American horror literature and media since. The unresolved nature of the case and the Benders' successful escape played a significant role in the case's legacy, as rumors continued over the years about their possible fates. With reports of sightings and supposed confessions, the Benders' escape became one of the Old West's greatest mysteries. The story fueled fears of strangers and reinforced the dangers of trusting unknown individuals, especially in isolated settings. Even today, historians and crime enthusiasts revisit the Bender case, with some suggesting new theories or linking newly found records to their supposed whereabouts, which only keeps the mystery alive. The psychological impact of the Bender case on the surrounding communities was profound. Families became more cautious, and the culture of hospitality along the trails shifted slightly, as the Benders' actions cast suspicion on other rural inns and stops. The trauma of learning that a seemingly ordinary family could turn violent on such a scale lingered, with locals passing down cautionary tales to future generations about the risks of the road and the unpredictability of people. Artifacts found at the Bender homestead, such as personal items belonging to the victims, were preserved and displayed by locals, sometimes even used as grim reminders of the family's deeds. The case also influenced law enforcement approaches to missing persons and suspicious activities in rural areas. Some historians argue that the Bender case highlighted the limitations of frontier justice and spurred discussions about the need for organized law enforcement, which would gradually transform the justice landscape in the West. Today, the Bloody Benders are remembered not just for the brutal crimes, but for the psychological scar they left on American society, marking a turning point in how violence, mystery, and justice intersected in the expansion era. Their story remains a focal point in discussions about the darker side of American pioneering life, and their legend has become a permanent, unsettling chapter in the country's folklore.